Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm out here practicing leading moving targets. Okay, so now obviously I've removed the scope from the rifle because I don't want to be pointing a gun at real people and cars and boats out there, but there's a lot that can be practiced by removing the scope from the rifle. There's certain things that we can do here that we can't easily do at a shooting range. Okay, so one of those things is practicing leading targets. Okay, so first let's and I did do a prior video on this, so I do kind of want to review some of the things that we talked about, technique. So first of all, let's talk about the scope that I have here. This is the Primary Arms PLX 1:8 by 24 first focal plane, a compact scope. Okay, so the great thing about the first focal plane, I mean, this is where I have found that like first focal plane rules, right? When it comes to leading, trying to shoot a moving target. I have found that most of the other stuff that I can do with the scope, I can do with a second focal plane scope. But because here's the thing, with the second focal plane scope, the measurements, your bullet drop compensator, whatever measurements you have, you have to be in 8 power for those measurements to be true. Okay, and usually that's fine. Okay, but when it comes to moving targets, what I found is a lot of times I have to dial back the scope either to a 3 power or even a 1 power to get that wider field of view, right? And the reason is because as I'm trying to track these targets, I'm going to talk to you about the technique. As I'm looking at the targets that are coming into my scope, I need to be able to kind of see them from the outer edge and kind of follow them in. So if I'm basically zoomed in, I can't see them until it's almost like too late. Okay, and I'll demonstrate. We'll talk about more what I mean. But first, let me give you guys a look at what we're seeing through the scope. So right now it is in first focal plane. So that's got a very generous eye relief. I'm usually able to line that up pretty quickly. Right. So you can see those cars moving back and forth. The focus may not be right because basically the camera doesn't know what to focus on, whether the glass, the reticle, the images in the background. Okay, so that's your first focal plane. So basically it's a duplex reticle. Okay, but there's some mill lines in there which are going to be very useful. So let me go up to 3 power. See if we can get an image in 3 power. Maybe out of focus, but you can see the mill lines. Okay. Let me try to zoom up to 8 power. Okay, so in 8 power, we have a very limited field of view and a terrible eye box. Like when I'm on the rifle, I can find it pretty quickly, but when it's trying to line it up behind the camera, it's especially hard. But that's indicative of if you're in an awkward position. Let's see if I can get this thing out of there and bring it back. Oh, yeah, there for a second. There it is. All right, so I'll try and give you guys a still. So let me put this away for a second, and I have a printout for you guys. So I've been working with the scope now for over a week. It's like one of those things, it's like I got it in my mind, and it's like every day this is what I think about. So that's why I just keep pumping out videos on this, because I'm just, because that's the thing I'm working on, and basically I'm practicing myself, and I'm basically sharing with you guys what I'm practicing. So the great thing about the first focal plane is that it shows you 2 different things at different magnifications. In 1 power you see this, okay, and in 8 power you see that. okay, which has these details over here, these lines. I've done other videos on what these lines mean. You got your auto ranging, you got your bullet drop compensator, you got your wind holes, right, for adjusting for the wind. Okay, so you know, lots of good stuff here. So you can figure out your distance, figure out what what your holdover needs to be, figure out how you have to adjust for the wind. So this is an excellent scope. And then basically when you're in 3 power, you kind of like, it's about, you guys saw what it kind of looked like. It was in the middle, so basically you're sort of like zooming in on the center over here. So let me talk about the technique that I'm using to basically track those targets and time the shot, because this is what it's about. You got, see, this is part of the reason why I come to this spot over here, is because I got people walking back and forth over there, running back and forth, bicycling back and forth, cars going back and forth, and I also got boats in the background going back and forth, jet skis going back and forth. So there's lots of things that I can follow over here and basically practice this. And it is something that you have to practice. It's not something that's just going to come naturally to you. You got to get used to the scope. You got to get used to things moving, and you got to figure out what magnification that you need to be in for different things. And this is where you kind of figure out that the second focal plane scopes aren't going to work so well for this, because if you time something, let's say in 3 power, but then you need to zoom in now or zoom out, now all of a sudden that the timing that you took is no longer any good. So it's like whatever magnification you timed it in, you have to stay in that, and that's just not practical. You got to be able to zoom in and out in order to track the things out there. Okay, so the technique that we're using, okay, is, let me get something out that I can point. So as one of those cars over there, got something I can point here with. As those cars are going by, what I'm doing is, to start off with, right? So let's say the car is going in this direction over here, right? As soon as the car passes this point over here, I do a 3-second count. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now in 8 power, it's already out of my view, right? So it's like 1, 2, 3. It's already out here. So with the cars, I definitely have to zoom all the way to 1 power, or zoom out all the way to 1 power, right? So I basically see a duplex reticle. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm using the horseshoe over here as basically the dot. So as soon as the car's going like this, as soon as it passes this point over here, I start counting 1, 2, 3, and basically the car gets all the way out here to the end of the duplex reticle. Okay, now I think I did a prior video on this, and I think I mixed this up with one of the boats that was out there. But this is what the cars are doing, right? Because the boats are doing something different. But this is in fact what the car's doing. So if I was to time this, okay, the car's going in that direction there, right? As soon as it passes here, I count 3 seconds, right? It comes here, 1, 2, 3, and I see that it gets here, right? I mean, you would do an even count, 1, 2, 3, right? It's just I know that I've already timed it, so I know in 3 seconds exactly where it's going to land. Now you could also use 2 seconds, or you can use 5 seconds. The problem is if I use 2 seconds. With the car, because it's like 1, 2, and it's like I really don't get a clear picture of where it's at. Okay, I don't, or if I do, let's say 5 seconds, right? Because I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's already out of my field of view. So I have to take a count that's gonna have where I can time it, where it's gonna land in a position that's convenient. So it doesn't matter where I'm doing a 2 count or a 3 count or a 4 count. I need it to land in a spot that I can work with. Okay. So it is really convenient with the cars with a 3-second count, right? As soon as it passes the horseshoe, I do 1, 2, 3, and it lands on this spot over here, which is very, very distinct, right? The edge of this post over here, right? So now, if the car's going this way, if I was to now lead this car in order to let's say that was an enemy or something I needed to shoot at, right? Let's say World War III broke out, right? Or World War IV. We already had World War III. Now we're on to World War IV. So if the car's going this way, as soon as it passes this line over here, right? As soon as it passes, boom! I take my shot, and then basically the bullet's already out there, and then the two are going to meet, right? So as soon as it passes here, boom, and then the two would converge over here. Okay, so that's going to work really good at the 150 yards. Where those cars are over there, right? And the reason is because in 150 yards, the time of flight of the bullet is insignificant inside of 150 yards. So I'm at 150 yards, I'm really only concerned with the speed of the car, okay? And as soon as it hits this line here, right? It's traveling from in this direction here. As soon as it hits this line here, now I would probably pull the trigger even slightly before it hit that line, because basically I'm going to allow a little bit for my delay, in case I'm a little slow on the trigger, right? A delayed action, right? So as soon as if that's where I timed it at, right on the line, which is where I did, I would pull the trigger, stop pulling the trigger just before that. Okay, so there's two methods here. One is the tracking method, and the other method is the ambush method, right? So I'm gonna, two completely different methods of which you can shoot at that mover, right? So one is, if we've already timed it so that the car needs to be here, and you're gonna shoot it there. So as soon as the car reaches this point here, right? You're going to start tracking it with your scope. So as the car is moving this way, you're going to track it, right? So you're going to fire a lot of shots. Let's say you have a 30-round magazine, right? You're going to dump, let's say, all 30 rounds. As soon as the car makes contact with this line over here, you're going to basically start shooting, and you're going to try to follow this, right? So assuming this, obviously the key is the car, right? So as it starts moving, you're going to keep following it and try to stay with it, okay? And the idea here is, as these two are moving along, right, you're trying to put more than one bullet on this car, right? Because you're just trying to pepper it. So you're going to start pulling the trigger, and you're just going to track it. You know where your starting point is. As soon as it crosses that, you start boop, 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 but you keep following it, keeping this point over here on your car as it's going that way, okay? All right, so, but this is not for a situation where this might work pretty good for a situation where the time of flight is not a factor, okay? But what if I got the boats out there, right, at 500 yards, right? So I got boats out there, and they're basically shooting in at us, right? This is our camp. Let's say this is our camp over here. So they're out there basically doing observation at about 500 yards, and they're also, they're basically just doing harassment. They're firing shots into our camp. And we want to get rid of that boat that's going back and forth out there, okay? So now at 500 yards, right, and this is the thing I did not cover in the last video, time of flight. How are we going to factor in for time of flight? Because we can track that boat out there that's going back and forth. And the way that mostly worked out, now with the boats at 500 yards, right, so I basically needed to basically zoom in to 8 power or 3 power, right, either 3 power or 8 power, depends on where when you look at it, you'll see where you're most comfortable with. So basically I zoomed in a little bit, and with the boats, what I saw is as soon as the boats are coming in, right? So with the boats, I was doing a 2-second count, right? So as soon as they I started over here, right? So the boats coming in, right? So basically as soon as they hit here, I go 1, 2, and then by 2 they would basically come to the end over here. So they would cross it 1, 2. They're coming in 1, 2, and they would more or less be over here on this 800-yard line, okay? So now if I'm going to lead it, right, basically on the other side, as soon as it crosses this line over here, right, as soon as it crosses this line, I start pulling the trigger. Boom, 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 boom. Now, and the idea is that the boat is going to basically meet my bullet over here. So I already determined that that this is where, on this side, right, as soon as it comes here, go 1, 2, it reaches here. So now we're going to basically move this over. As the boat comes in, as soon as it hits this line, we start pulling the trigger, and the two are going to meet over there. But the problem now, it becomes at 500 yards. How do we factor in for time of flight, right? Because now that bullet at 500 yards is going to take probably a second and a half to get out there, okay? And that's something that can be a little difficult to calculate. So I was actually talking with Dimitri about this, and he gave me an idea. The way I think a good way to do this is, if we've timed it so that we need to start here, right? What we're going to do is we're going to start, instead of starting at this line, we're going to start shooting it when it gets to this line over here. So as the boat's coming in, right? Boat's coming in. As soon as it crosses this line, we're going to start shooting it, but we're not going to track it, right? We're not going to do what we did before with the car, where we're trying to stay on it. We're going to keep the scope steady, and as soon as because we're going a little further back, we're going to start shooting at it keep the scope steady without moving it, and keep pulling the trigger. And the idea is that we're going to start shooting ahead of the boat. So we're going to, as the boat's coming in, we're going to start shooting ahead of the boat. And then basically at some point, because we don't know at what point, but at some point, because we're dumping a 30-round magazine out there, at some point the two are going to meet up. Okay, so but we need a starting point. We need to know, need to have some idea of where to start and back up a little bit from there. So with the boats, it turns out that that's the thing. In the 2-second timing, they pretty much start there. So I'm going to back up just a little bit more, okay? And as soon as they cross that, start pulling the trigger, but don't move the scope, and then just let the, I mean, I would probably stop as soon as the boat gets like up to the horseshoe over here, or the 800-yard line, right? As soon as it crosses this line, start shooting, boom, 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 and then stop shooting as soon as it gets here, and then something should hit it. Okay, something should hit it, because the idea here is that we want to put some, you know, basically they're out there shooting in at us, annoying us. We need to annoy them back. Okay, so if we're just shooting out there and everything's missing, you know, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing because they don't feel threatened. But if we start putting some bullets and some holes in their boat, okay, obviously we're not going to sink the boat, but we start putting some holes in their boat, they're like, wait a second, these guys know how to shoot, we're obviously in their range, you know, maybe this isn't going to be a good place because, you know, who knows, the next shot might be a headshot. You know, they because again, they don't know what we know and how good we are and what capabilities we are. All they know is that we put a couple of holes in their boat. They don't know that we shot 30 rounds and only maybe 3 hit the boat, right? But the point is, we need those 3 to hit the boat. Because remember, this isn't an armored boat, right? It's not, you know, World War III, you know, World War IV, right? That's probably not a military boat out there. That's probably some yahoos looking for an opportunity to raid our camp and take our supplies. So they probably got a wooden boat. We need to put a couple of holes in their boat. You know, not that it's going to sink it, but just enough for them to see the holes and say, hey, this is not a soft target. Okay, we need to go find some other camp that's you know, it doesn't have this type of capability. So that's my thought as far as how to hit a moving target at, you know, beyond 200 yards, right? Because at 150 yards, the time of flight really isn't a problem. Okay, it's once we get really past, you know, once we get past 200 yards, you know, past 300 yards, really, time of flight starts becoming an issue. And I wanted to do a follow-up video to the first one I did with leading the targets, because I needed some solution, some way of dealing with that time of flight. You know, and his thing is, the time of the flight of the bullet is really hard to factor into this equation. So the best that we can do is lead it a little bit more, right? Basically allow for it, you know, take a fixed position, you know, the ambush position, and then just start peppering it and basically let the target come into our line of fire. Okay? So let me know if this makes any sense, if it's difficult, you know, to understand, you know, because this is a difficult subject to, you know, it just can be a difficult subject for people to understand if they're listening to it for the first time. If anything is not clear, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try and do another video to clarify it better. Okay, I'll talk to you all soon.